history of one of the partners in Vintage Partners. Monty Ortman was one of the founding partners of Eldorado Holdings, and he, you know, the history of Eldorado, they worked for years getting 347 done to turn Maricopa into what it is today, 50,000 people from, you know, just a few thousand people in the whole community. And so when the recession hit, this property right here and this property, this 21 acres around CDS and the 15 acres next to Fry's, both went back to lenders. And Monty Orman was one of the first people that the brokers called when the lenders decided they wanted to sell them and get them out of their assets. So in 2011, we bought the 21 acres around CBS, and in 2012, we bought the 15 acres next to Fry's. The reason that we said this is kind of a no-brainer is John Wayne, as you guys know, just by the traffic, and Smith Inc., it's really Main and Main. And in the retail world, when you have a cluster like this and a funnel, there's almost, and you can do almost anything that you need to. Yes, the infrastructure needs to expand, which is a good thing that some of the petitions are passing, because you can't have a funnel like this forever, and it's always going to be the main drag and the main intersection. So the retail is going to do really well, but it's just getting to the point where it's too jammed up. We can't even. I reiterated, you know, the issue that happened down the street when we did our offsite construction on John Wayne. The construction guys started at 6 a.m. and shut the whole road down. Nobody could get to work for 2 days. So it made it real clear that if they do that here, I've warned them, can't start until 9 a.m. But when we were looking at this property in particular, you know, it originally was supposed to be a Home Depot with just a couple of pads because of the depth of it. Home Depot eventually decided it was going to go down to the wells, and then the recession hit, and it never moved forward. We felt like, you know, even though the retail world was changing, we still needed to follow the similar plan to what was there before. And this is the infrastructure that was in, and I know it's hard to see, but these large tanks right here, they were in the ground for the last 10 years. And they actually held up, which is surprising, because normally it wouldn't. Most of the other infrastructure, sewer lines, power lines and everything that we're in, we had to tear out, which was unfortunate. We didn't expect that. And then I found this interesting. In 2012, when we bought it, we had a topographical map done just to see what was here, and you can actually see where the building pads that they built eroded away over, you know, that was just a 5-year period when that happened. So when we went out and started marketing this property, the feedback from the retailers was very frustrating. I'm sure a lot of people have heard it, and you guys get tired of it too, but the first comment is, well, wasn't that the poster child of the recession? And isn't it in the Casa Grande trade area, in which Casa Grande has, mainly because of Promenade down there, they have way too much retail. And then they said, well, we need to get to 70,000 people before we'll go to Maricopa. And we just said, well, there's 50, but they don't have any services. And that didn't work. And then when they run their studies, they don't see any daytime employment. So it was all, it took a number of years to educate most of the retailers. Maricopa was really the first to bounce back from the recession because the housing market was hit so hard. So if you looked at it, they thought everyone had left, but it really, a lot of people moved back in because it's so much more affordable than everywhere else. So that 50,000 people really stayed maintained right after the recession. The residents mostly shop in the Chandler area, not in Casa Grande, which you talk to Ross, for example, and they say, well, our Casa Grande store doesn't do as well. So we would say, no, check your Chandler stores and see what zip code these people are shopping from. And most of the retailers figured it out, that most Maricopa residents, if they're going to do major shopping, go to Chandler instead of Casa Grande, because it's closer from a driving standpoint. And I've only had a few people say that they go to Casa Grande because there's nobody there, it's easy to get into. You get everything you need. And then we tried to point out to the fact that yes, there's 50,000 is kind of a lower end of the benchmark for a lot of retailers, but there's no competition. You know, if you're the first soft goods clothing supplier down here, you're the only one. And that sunk in with a few people, and we were really happy eventually to get somebody like Ross who saw the light, and obviously to move forward. And then with restaurants, we felt like they needed to, if we could just get them to come down during the day and see how much traffic there is and see all the people in the restaurants during the day, they would realize that the studies may not show daytime employment, but there's a lot of people down here during the day and a lot of people coming through here during the day. And I'll kind of explain where we are with that as we get into the marketing. This was one of the first site plans we did. We were working with Ace Hardware to try and actually do an expanded store for them and sell them a parcel so they could do a larger outdoor area. This is Goodwill. They were here from the start. And we did not have anybody for this, and then we felt like we'd see if there was a daycare. We left the bank on there, even though we didn't really know what we were going to do with that. As we went through our studies and we discussed it with different retailers, we ended up finding interest from hotels, because we knew that was something the community wanted. Big Five was interested in going there. They patiently waited for a number of years until they decided to go down by Walmart. And then we didn't have a drive-through on this, but Dunkin' was always a possibility for that parcel as well. And so we went out, we hit everybody that we could, everyone that we could think of. We knew a full-service restaurant was very important to the community. We removed the bank from the plan because it just wasn't realistic. And we tried to get somebody to go with Goodwill, a larger fashion group, and tried to get the Ace Hardware to relocate so they could have a bigger facility. But eventually, because we didn't gain any traction, we ended up, Ace Hardware staying where they are, and we ended up trying to show a bigger building here, because Big Five was talking about leaving, and then LA Fitness said they wanted to build a facility here as well. And LA Fitness, they're very difficult deals to do, and it's a good thing they didn't come because the city put a lot of money into Copper Sky. And this hotel layout is actually the same developer, the operator that is trying to go on the southwest corner of Edison and John Wayne. He's been around since 2013, so we couldn't make it work here. It was just a little bit too tight back in this corner, and he had to bring in a different partner that he's working with to go across the street. But I'm hopeful that they'll be able to get that done. I know the developer of that corner is doing everything he can to get it done, and so hopefully you guys can have some sort of a limited service hotel. I know because that is important to the community. So eventually the LA Fitness deal died, and in 2014 Ross showed up. That'll tell you how long it took us to get that done. And then we started to go through some other uses for this corner as well. And we started, if we have Ross, we immediately were thinking, well, let's go try and get some other users that'll go with Ross, the famous footwears of the world, Maurice's, Route 21. And if you've been watching the retail, that particular retail category over the last year, most of those uses are closing stores or they're filing bankruptcy entirely. So that's still our goal. You'll see that this plan looks similar to what we have today, but we've tried as hard as we can to get soft goods to go with Ross because they do create a bigger draw. They also allowed us to turn the Dunkin' building into a multi-tenant building, and Burger King, this is not the plan that they were with, that was the original plan they showed. Burger King said they would go absolutely if Ross was here, and then we felt like we could get a couple more restaurants out on the pads to do full service there. In 2015, we kind of gave up on putting some sort of a hardware store or never mind. I'll talk to you. And we ended up working with Planet Fitness, who was going into this corner right here, and they one requirement that Ross has, so if you do become a member of Planet Fitness, you'll understand why, but Ross won't allow a fitness user within a certain distance of them. So they said the only way they would allow Planet Fitness here is if we put the door on the corner. So anyone who becomes a member, please park over here. So they want, even though there's tons of parking here, they're very sensitive about their parking field. At this time, we started talking to Petco and trying to fit them into here and also maybe over here, and worked with them, and we actually had a lease done. It was approved by the community, by the real estate committee, and they changed ownerships. And right towards the end, in 2000, after we had gone through city approvals and this was done, that we moved them over here, it's still, once they changed ownerships, they made it go back to their real estate committee, and that's when they killed it at the last minute. So if you saw us in 2000, or what was it, February or so, February, March, when we started construction, that was when we thought we had Petco, they were about to sign. When they went away, we had to put the whole thing on hold. That's why we moved a bunch of dirt. And in the media, I was just saying, we had to pull some utilities out, but in reality, we lost one of our anchors and we can no longer finance it. This was what we marketed, and that still had the Petco at the beginning of the year. And we were trying to figure out how we could do full service restaurants here, and because that's, again, what we're really focused on. We had been trying forever to get Buffalo Wild Wings to go on this corner. But Buffalo Wild Wings didn't see any daytime employment, and so they said they could only pay a certain rent. And construction costs, even at the beginning of last year, were significantly higher than they had been in a long time. They're much worse even today. And so for new construction, there's just a certain rent for a lender that a lender needs us to get, and Buffalo Wild Wings wouldn't even come close to it. What we found out later is that they were doing that all over the Southwest, which really frustrated their broker. But they just didn't understand why they had to pay market rent for new construction. And so they are very interested in the market. They have approved it, but we are unable to put them in. And so I'm not sure if they'll actually end up coming down here. This tenant right here was Brakes Plus. They've been very patient with us for a number of years, and we're still amending some CC&Rs to get them going. And now we have a potential buyer, a full-service restaurant for this hard corner, breakfast focused, obviously not Denny's that's going down the street, but they hopefully we'll go into escrow soon, and they can try to catch up with the rest of the project. When you do tilt buildings, which I think is really interesting, I don't know if anybody else does, the construction group goes out and they pour these forms and they put all the walls on the ground laying down. And within literally days, the entire building is up. And the first time I saw that, I was blown away, but it gets people really excited really fast, but there's still a ton of work to do. This building right here that you guys see coming up, which is Dunkin' Donuts on the end, that has to be done at the same time. Ross requires that everything be 100% done by the time we give them the space. They literally, there's no wiggle room, not even by a day. So we're hurrying right now to enclose all the buildings, especially the anchor sections, because most of them have to be done. Goodwill has to be done by February 15th. Ross has to be done by February 12th. 100%, drop ceilings in, sheetrock, paint, carpet, all that has to be completely done by those dates. And so there are some huge crews out there doing all this work right now. And luckily we got it bid before Hurricane Harvey, because that has created a massive spike in construction costs, and it's almost to the point where it's killing a number of projects, and it's especially affecting home building, because the number one product that's been hit by it, which you can understand why when you think about it, is lumber. When Harvey hit and you had 10 feet of water across all the buildings and the homes, that meant, in Houston, huge city, that meant that all that had to be ripped out. You had to rip out all the sheetrock, a lot of the wood frame that's in all those buildings and homes. And so that has spiked dramatically, and we're having trouble figuring out how to build this last phase. And so luckily we're not bidding it right now because we're still trying to figure it out, but we have a major shoe group that we're trying to put here on the end, a family-focused pizza place that we go in here, and then a dental group that is looking to purchase this corner. That's why you can see us cutting off the end and creating a separate building that they can build a freestanding building on. In the Duncan building, we have signed a lease with Wingstop, and then the local operator of a few of the nail salons here wanted to protect her market, and so she's doing a nail salon in the middle there. But the goal here is to try and still get some fashion to go with Ross, and then still get some restaurants to go in here, full service. Talk to a microbrewery local, but we're having trouble figuring out how to get around some of the Ross restrictions and then Fry's restrictions, because Fry's doesn't allow you to sell packaged liquor in their centers. We're building this building. We shrunk it just a little bit, which was not easy since we were 100% done with the design of Petco. And we have a lease that we're working on with a tenant that would backfill it. We can't announce it. Plus I have a lot of work to do to try and get it figured out. But that building's going to get built either way. And we were lucky enough that our lender allowed us to move forward with that building, even without a tenant, because there was a lot of spec space built during the last boom, and without any tenants in it, and so banks are not really open to considering that nowadays. And they were okay with it here because it was next to Fry's, and they trusted that we'll fill it. We've gone through almost every major tenant that you'd see in any retail center. You go through all around Chandler Fashion, anything on Ray Road and I-10. You look at all those tenants, we've talked to all, and we've been marketing it for 5 years. And they are just slowly wrapping their heads around Maricopa. They like that Ross is here. They like that housing's going up, but we haven't hit that magic number for some of them of 70,000. And for a lot of them, they just feel like it's going to take a little bit longer for them to get comfortable. And we think with the buildings being up, especially the anchors in the back, that they'll see how great an opportunity this is. Ross's sales will show up, everyone will see how well they're doing, and then we'll be able to fill the rest of this. But this piece right here will just be dirt for probably into March, I would guess. And then hopefully we'll have enough to start on.